details of all of that with the front bench up this evening. Christy Clark, John Tory, and Judy Trinh. They're back, I should say. Judy, I'll start with you because you covered this all day.
Yes, I was there.
Why is this so much? I mean, every single question the Conservatives ask to the Liberals, the response involves something around women's rights and women's reproductive rights.
Right.
Why is that?
Why is that? Well, because that is a vulnerability that the opposition, or that the government and the NDP sense that the Conservatives have. It's been lingering around for many years. It's always the bogeyman, right, in terms of this fear that is cast upon the Conservatives. But I think what is interesting is that there were at least 2 Conservative MPs at this rally today. I should point out that there were probably more than 3,000 people at this rally who are against abortion rights versus about 200 on the other side. So there was a significant difference. So I think that whether or not it is interesting to me because when you talk to this crowd, they don't necessarily believe that the Conservatives will bring in an abortion law, but they believe that perhaps some Conservatives will at least keep on pushing for it, and that there is that lingering hope. But it doesn't mean that this group believes that Pierre Poilievre is the answer. So I was surprised to hear that. I thought that more people would voice explicit support for him, but that wasn't the case.
John, what's your sort of take on the strategy the Liberals are employing? I mean, it's not new necessarily, the idea of talking about any sort of waffling in the Conservatives. The last 2 elections, it worked to the Liberals' advantage in some instances. Do you think it has the same chance of success this time?
It has some, and that's in part because we're going to see an election play itself out this fall in the United States where it's going to be a very significant issue. So the whole thing is going to be discussed on, I'll call it both sides, and it will therefore be in the minds of Canadians as it has been in the past. I think the Liberals are, wise to raise it as long as the Conservatives don't do 2 things. One, and maybe it's all tied into one. Mr. Poilievre has said he wouldn't legislate to recriminalize abortion, but he hasn't made the kind of really broad blanket statement that Stephen Harper very wisely did and kept it real all the way through the time he was Prime Minister, which is this issue is not going to be discussed. It's not going to be raised by people in my party in the House of Commons if they were the government. And he kept to that. And in this case, you had even today, I think, some Conservative MP making a motion. You had 2 of them showing up at this rally, which is fine. It's a free country to go to the rally. But, I think it always allowed Stephen Harper to kind of just bat that away. And Mr. Poilievre has been a little less specific than that. And he's raised himself the notwithstanding clause, which isn't directly relevant to abortion. But, in the Canadians' minds who don't understand the workings of the notwithstanding clause, they would just think, well, he's prepared to sort of, curtail rights and use the notwithstanding clause in one instance. Why might not it happen in another? So I think as long as he's not as clear as he, I think, has to be in light of the U.S. situation, the Liberals are, better they should be talking about that than axe the tax, I suppose, and so in that sense, I guess it's just more political theater and it's happening, and what can we do about it?
John's point about the notwithstanding clause, Christy, I think is what prompted some of this. And, to be fair to the Conservatives, they did release a statement last night. I think we have it. We can throw it up on the screen. They said these outlandish claims show the true desperation of Justin Trudeau and his flailing Liberals. A common sense Conservative government will not legislate on abortion and therefore would never use this section of the Constitution pertaining to this matter. The problem is last week when the Globe initially did a piece on whether they would use the notwithstanding clause beyond the scope of just criminality, they didn't explicitly say no right away. A day later after the article was published, they said, no, oh, wait, here's our new statement. We really won't. We won't use it anywhere else. And they've continued to say that. Do you think the statement that they provided here, for example, goes far enough to what John's talking about to quell the characterizations the Liberals are putting forward?
Well, I think it's the best statement they could have come up with to quell it. I mean, whether or not, I doubt it will, because it's the oldest, best trick that people fighting the Conservative Party always have, which is to raise the specter of a change in abortion rights. Because one of the biggest areas of groups of swing voters are women, and women are very strongly, or much more strongly, concerned about this issue than anybody else for obvious reasons. So, I think it was a very strong statement, but boy, sloppy mess that they ended up finding themselves in, and it was a problem that they themselves created, not what we're used to seeing from the very, very disciplined Conservative campaign and Mr. Poilievre. So I was a little bit surprised they've got themselves into this quagmire. But let's just remember here, and John was right to say many Canadians don't understand how the notwithstanding clause works. It was added as part of the constitutional changes that Pierre Trudeau made in recognition of the fact that it would give the Supreme Court so much power over areas that used to be decided by people who were elected. And that's why the notwithstanding clause is there. So could someone, if legislation was introduced to change the abortion laws, use it? Yes. Would Canadians like that? No. But the notwithstanding clause on its own is something that should be in our Constitution. Britain doesn't have a Charter of Rights, our mother parliament doesn't have that. And the reason that, and they find their way without a notwithstanding clause and without a charter. So it's there for a good reason. It shouldn't be used for this. I don't think it ever would be used for this. And, as I said, people make mistakes all the time in politics, and this was a big mistake on Poilievre's part.
I think part of it also, and John referenced this, Judy, is the timing, right? This is something the Liberals normally bring out closer to Election Day. We're a year and a half away, let's say. But it's this. I think it's also the specter of what's unfolding in the United States and the fact that reproductive rights there have been a very big motivator. If Trump ultimately is successful in the fall, that could have a huge impact on the questions people ask of the Conservatives here. If he isn't, it may be completely moot. I don't know.
One thing that I've noticed, you read that statement by Sebastian Skamsky, a Conservative spokesperson. Why is it that Pierre Poilievre can't come right out and say it, right? He has said it before, perhaps. I've heard a clip during the leadership debate. His wife has said it in an interview in French, that they are pro-choice. But I think at this time, perhaps if he really wanted to quell anything, he would come right out and say, this is where I stand. A government under Pierre Poilievre would not legislate. So Skamsky has said it for him. How come Pierre Poilievre hasn't said it? So I think that is something that I would want to push Pierre Poilievre on, because that would put to rest a lot of this criticism. But I have yet to see that.
Well, I think he'll continue to get questions, is my guess. I mean, to be fair to them, we asked the spokesperson to send us a statement yesterday when this first came out, and that's why we got a response from him. And he did say it in that leadership debate. I was there in Edmonton when it happened, but not since the latest sort of questions have been raised, particularly where the notwithstanding clause is concerned, to be fair to your comment. As far as the impact potentially, John, of what does unfold south of the border, I do think if Donald Trump ends up being president, it does sort of change the backdrop against which the Liberals will start talking about this stuff and the potential impact of it.
On a lot of things. But, having said that on this particular issue, yes. And look, let's remember as well, it isn't all about one person. I mean, the reason I think Mr. Poilievre needs to be more specific in terms of how he's going to deal with his MPs on this is because you've seen in the United States, it isn't all about a Supreme Court case. It's about what individual legislators can do all around the edges of this issue to fundamentally affect the rights of women to make their own choice. And so I think, when Mr. Harper was very clear, he wouldn't put up with motions coming from his members back in that day. That was a very effective way of saying this issue is just not on the table, period, full stop, from nobody, not from me and not from my MPs. And I think that was quite effective, and he stuck to it. And I think it helped the PC, or the then Conservative Party, to, to not have this as an issue and to be in office, frankly.
And Vashi, the reason he doesn't answer
Christy,
questions directly about this and with a crystal clear stance is because he doesn't want to risk a break on the right of his party. The People's Party, and there's all the rest of these kind of far right groups that are floating around. He's united the Conservative Party, and if he comes out with some definitive statement, more definitive than the one he's already put out, that's not going to help him politically. I don't, when I led a coalition of Conservatives and Liberals in British Columbia, I am very pro-choice. But I'll tell you, we never came out with any huge statements that would potentially alienate people that on the Conservative side, women and men who may be pro-life. We governed without any intention and any effort to try and restrict women's rights to abortion. And it's just, it's a political question for him. So I hope, if Judy's hoping for an answer on that, I'm going to say I think she's very unlikely to get one. And I will see all three of you in People magazine in the Who Wore It Best section at the in the back in the coming
Looking
week.
forward to it. Yeah, we literally look like triplets tonight. Okay, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Our wonderful front bench, John Tory, Christy Clark, and Judy Trinh. Our takeaway is up next. Have a great evening.